Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back a few thousand years, to a time when the air in Thebes wasn't just full of sand and secrets, it was absolutely soaked in perfume. Not the kind you spritz at a department store, mind you. We're talking resins, smoldering on altars, cone-shaped waxes, melting down wigs, and sweet oils slathered onto sun-baked skin. You'll wander narrow alleyways lit by flickering oil lamps, past temple courtyards humming with incense, and maybe even get a whiff of what ancient bug spray smelled like spoiler. It was not exactly citronella. Now, I've got to warn you, you probably wouldn't survive a single Egyptian summer in those linen layers. Drenched in fragrance and sweat, fending off flies the size of figs. But don't worry, we're not actually going outside. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your evening just as twilight bleeds over the stone skyline of Thebes. The sun's descent turns the Nile into a streak of bronze, and on both sides of the river, narrow streets begin to stir with a curious rhythm. The soft clink of perfume bottles, the scrape of market carts, and the swish of sandals brushing sand from worn flagstones. You trail behind a pair of aristocrats fanning themselves lazily as they cross a courtyard. Their wigs are powdered, scented, and a bit too high for balance. Perched on top, a small cone of wax melting slowly under the evening heat and releasing floral notes of blue lotus and frankincense. It dribbles fragrantly down the sides of their wigs and, you suspect, into their drinks. No one seems to mind. This isn't just fashion, it's functional. You catch a whiff of something spicy, perhaps cassia bark or crushed juniper. It's pleasant at first, then surprisingly sharp. That sharpness, that's the point. The perfume is pulling double duty, masking body odor in the pre-deodorant age and keeping the flies at bay. A perfumed breeze drifts from an open doorway nearby. Inside, a wealthy household is preparing for the nightly onslaught of bugs, heat, and, well, gods. Bowls of scented oil sit in corners, each with its own sacred or hygienic purpose. Servant carefully fans a shallow dish of burning resin, creating little puffs of smoke designed to chase insects toward the open windows, assuming they haven tea already died of sensory overload. Historians still argue whether these early perfumes were primarily spiritual or sanitary. Did the ancient Egyptians really believe certain scents pleased the gods? Or did they just discover, very practically, that cloying sweetness masked the stench of open sewage and stagnant water? You shuffle down an alleyway, past reed mats and carved wooden doors, noticing how even the poorer quarters attempt their own olfactory defenses. A child tosses dried herbs onto a smoky brazier, and you get a whiff of thyme, maybe a pinch of cedar. It's not Chanel, but in a world where hygiene is largely theoretical, it's trying, and it's everywhere. In homes, temples, tombs, and marketplaces, the smell of ancient Egypt is not dust and decade's intention. Every scent has a job to do. You pass a stall in the perfume district where a merchant is loudly insisting that his oils were infused under the second moon, whatever that means. He is waving a small alabaster jar at a weary noblewoman who already has 3 other jars tucked into her belt sash. You suspect she's not shopping for the gods. She's shopping for relief from heat, from bugs, from the ever-present stench of fish, livestock, and humans packed too closely together. There's something soothing about how seriously they take this. Perfume here isn't just a luxury, it's a defense mechanism, a personal ritual, a daily spell. You duck into a small side chapel off the main road. A priest is lighting incense that billows up like fog, curling around hieroglyphs and hanging in the air like ghostly handwriting. The scent is strong, probably a kefi blend, which scholars believe included honey, wine, raisins, myrrh, and, depending on the recipe, maybe even mint or cannabis. Don't get excited, probably wasn't the fun kind. But it was potent, and it lingered. The priest moves slowly, rhythmically, and the smoke pools around you, not just in your nose, but somehow under your skin. For a moment, you forget the heat, the noise, the itchy linen tunic. The scent takes over. You're suspended in a moment of stillness. Not bad for what might have started as bug spray. Outside again, you see another household preparing for dinner. This one is richer, judging by the servants and the size of their incense brazier. Someone is brushing scented oil on the floor tiles to freshen the room before guests arrive. The smell is lemony, sharp, maybe even antiseptic. It reminds you of a high-end spaff. The spa also had camels loudly protesting in the background. Fun fact: some scholars believe the ancient Egyptians were among the first to develop what we might call room fragrance. Not exactly plug-in diffusers, but bowls of oils placed strategically in corners, under chairs and beside doors to gently waft scent through a home. The most luxurious homes probably smelled like a mix of heaven and headache. There's something oddly comforting about it. The predictability. The ritual. The belief that a certain combination of oils burned at a certain hour might do something more than just smell nice. That it might protect you, or at least keep the flies out of your dinner. As you step onto the flat roof of a small house, you feel the breeze carry a symphony of smells, some sweet, some sharp, some frankly confusing. But they swirl together into a cloud of care, of effort, of intention. A nightly battle against rot, stench, and mosquitoes. And in this gentle fog of fragrance, you settle. You breathe deeply. You wonder what your room would smell like if you swapped your air freshener for melted myrrh. It's probably still better than that crocodile dung sunscreen we'll get to later. You follow your nose toward the sound of distant music, soft flutes, the rhythmic tap of clappers, and laughter carried on a warm breeze. As the dusk deepens into evening, you find yourself approaching a grand estate. Its entrance flanked by palm trees and open braziers. Inside, the household is preparing for a formal gathering, and already, guests are arriving in their finest linen, adorned in jewelry that jingles faintly with every movement. Everyone looks slightly taller than usual, or maybe it's just the wigs. These are not your average party wigs. No, these are glorious constructions, layered, powdered, curled, and sometimes even beaded. And nearly all of them are topped with something that, at first glance, looks like a fancy dessert. A glossy conical dollop perched atop the crown. You watch, mesmerized, as a waxy substance slowly begins to melt, trailing down the hair in aromatic rivulets. Welcome to the world of scented cons, arguably the most unintentionally hilarious and weirdly practical trend of New Kingdom high society. Now, historians are still debating whether these perfumed cones were everyday wear, ceremonial, or just idealized in tomb paintings. What we do know is that art and inscriptions depict partigores and even gods sporting these aromatic head toppers, and the general idea: a waxy blend of fat and fragrant oils that slowly melts under the heat, releasing perfume while coating the wig to keep it glossy and bug-resistant. Because nothing says fashion-forward like a slow-drip candle made of animal fat sliding down your scalp, while you try to flirt over lentils. You make your way into the garden, where banquet tables are being set under fig trees strung with lanterns. Servants bring out trays of roasted duck, bread shaped like crocodiles, and bowls of lotus wine. But your attention is firmly locked on the perfumed haze hanging in the air. Everyone smells incredible. There's myrrh, frankincense, maybe cinnamon, and something faintly citrusy. Each guest's scent is slightly different, but none of them are subtle. This is Egypt. You don't whisper your presence. You waft. You sit near a group of musicians, young women with shaved heads, painted eyes, and strings of beads jingling at their ankles. Even they wear small, hardened cones tucked behind their ears. With every sway and bend, the scent intensifies. The guests dip bread into sauces, sip herbal wine, and gossip about palace intrigue. One man claims his cousin imports a rare perfume ingredient from Punt, though no one's really sure where Punt is. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's just really great marketing. A servant passes by with a ceramic jar, lifting the lid just enough to refresh a nearby cone. You catch a stronger burst of aroma, this time possibly henna and galbanum. Or maybe someone just spilled wine on a tree. It's worth noting that the actual recipe for these cones is lost to time. Modern experiments suggest they may have been made with tallow, beeswax, or a combination of resins. And animal fats, infused with essential oils from plants like marjoram, calamus, and sweet flag. But it's all guesswork. Some scholars suggest the cones warranty real, at all that they were a symbolic flourish, added by artists to show divine favor or social status. Others argue the cones were stored in cold places and applied fresh each evening, melting gradually during the festivities. Of course, there's the fringe theory that they were frozen like ancient ice cream treats, but let's just say ancient Egypt didn't invent refrigeration before deodorant. Still, as you sit there in this dreamy scene, you can't help but notice how everyone seems calmer, sleepier even. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's the music. Or maybe there's something undeniably soothing about being surrounded by drifting perfume. Knowing it's not just to impress your neighbor, but also to discourage mosquitoes from turning your shin into a buffet. And oh, those mosquitoes. They are never far behind. One guest with slightly too many gold rings is complaining that the imported scent cones from the Delta region Danti last as long as the southern ones. His wife rolls her eyes and mentions that last week. He tried rubbing garlic juice behind his ears because a street vendor told him it was all the rage in Memphis. She says it didn't repel the bugs, but it certainly repelled dinner conversation. You look around and spot a few guests without contrabells or simply late to the trend. They swat more, scratch more. They look vaguely shinier in a not good way. You make a note. In ancient Egypt, the fragrance survived. The banquet winds on. Servant offers you a dab of rose oil from a small alabaster flask. It's strong, almost cloying. But when the breeze picks up and carries a waft of Nile mud, you're suddenly grateful for the olfactory armor. You can't help but marvel at the complexity of it all. Perfume here isn't just about smelling tied to identity, status, and even spirituality. These aren't just fashion statements. They're shields, rituals, and conversation starters. They're memories made aromatic. And as your eyelids grow heavier under the influence of floral-laced smoke and hypnotic drumbeats, you notice the night insects keeping their distance, hovering instead near a darkened corner where no cones are melting. Smart bugs. You drift deeper into the evening, head still spinning with heady blends of herbs and oils, thinking maybe, just maybe someone in the future will say the same about your scented shampoo. Assuming anyone ever wears wigs again. You wake, or perhaps you never fully slept still, nestled in the cooling garden shadows. Your mind gently perfumed by the echoes of music and the slow melt of scented cones. The night deepens, and now your steps lead you away from the laughter of the party and toward a quieter chamber in the same estate. A servant opens a carved wooden door, revealing shelves lined with alabaster jars, reed baskets, and tightly sealed pots. You've arrived in the household's perfume pantry, so to speak. The air here is heavier, richer, more complex. Not from the flowers outside or the incense from the temple, but from what's stored here. Raw ingredients. You can almost taste it, the sticky sweet scent of honey, sharp traces of cedarwood, and something musty, like dried animal fat that's been sitting a little too long. That is likely because that's exactly what it is. Welcome to the behind-the-scenes reality of ancient Egyptian perfumery. You kneel beside a shelf, eyeing the contents of a half-open jar. A servant nearby offers a matter-of-fact explanation. This is goose fat, aged and filtered, used as a base for blending oils. Apparently, it holds scent better than palm oil, and when applied to skin, it gives a nice sheen and blocks a bit of sun. And Though no one says it out loud, the fat repels biting insects more or less by grossing them out. You sniff cautiously. The smell is ... complex. Not quite offensive, but definitely not something you'd want to rub into your hair without a little jasmine to help it along. Sitting on a low shelf is a container labeled in hasty hieratic script. Inside, powdered cinnamon bark. Next to it, mastic gum crushed into sticky pearls. There is also a mysterious dark powder. Someone says it's spikenard. Someone else suggests it might just be powdered beetle. Nobody really agrees. And of course, tucked in a corner, you find the infamous vial labeled civet. Yes, that's civet. The one that comes from the scent glands of a very confused and very unwilling cat-like creature. Historians still argue whether animal-derived ingredients like civet or musk were used widely in Egyptian perfumery, or only appeared much later through trade. But it wouldn't be surprising if some form of cat contribution ended up in the fancier perfumes after all. Ancient Egyptians were no strangers to mixing sacred symbolism with strong smells. You run your finger along the edge of a ceramic plate, noticing the sticky remnants of what must have been a test batch. The texture is grainy, uneven. This wasn't a perfect science. Creating perfume in ancient Egypt wasn't a sterile lab experiment. It was more like experimental cooking with a side of ritual chanting. And yet, it worked. One assistant pours warm water into a clay bowl and stirs in a thick syrup of frankincense and lotus oil. Another begins to mash herbs using a polished stone pestle. The entire room smells like a potion brewing in a temple, somewhere between divine and domestic. The blend is ladled into mold small, cone-shaped agenand, left to set near an open window. You wonder what they'll smell like when hardened. Will they last longer, melt differently? Will they ward off beetles or summon the attention of someone special at tomorrow's feast? There's a certain trilander elegance to the whole operation. Not every recipe was meant to succeed. In fact, many written formulas from the time include vague measurements, like as much as needed, or until it smells strong. Some even suggest unusual additions like beer residue, burnt bread, or even salted fish, brined perhaps not for the perfume itself, but for preparing ingredients. At least, hopefully. One note of humor. A badly preserved scroll found near Deir el-Medina includes a recipe crossed out with the phrase, "not for use on the face." You can only imagine what poor apprentice had to test that one. You sit beside the small open window where another batch of cones is slowly solidifying. The wax reflects the flickering torchlight like amber. A cat slinks by outside, tail raised in either blessing or judgment. You're never sure with cats here. You rest your head against the cool wall, letting the dense, herbal-laced air wrap around your senses. You inhale traces of marjoram, balsam, juniper, and maybe just the faintest scent of fermented fig, which someone really should move out of the sun. The night is quieter now. Even the insects seem to buzz more softly, perhaps repelled by the potent stew of aromatics wafting from the chamber. Or perhaps they've simply given up. And though it may all seem a bit messy, unrefined, and deeply experimental, you can't help but admire the effort. This isn't just vanity. It's knowledge, survival, culture, and maybe, just maybe, the very first version of pest control that didn't involve swatting things with a sandal. You close your eyes for a moment, still seated in the makeshift lab. And imagine a life where your daily routine involves weighing myrrh, slicing open fragrant tree sap, and guessing which melted animal fat won't rot in the sun. It's chaotic, it's ancient, it's strangely comforting, and it smells way better than your gym bag ever will. You awaken though. You not sure you ever fully left from the comfort of waxy perfumes and fig-scented air to find yourself standing beneath towering stone columns. This isn't someone's home anymore. You're in a temple, and not just any temple, a place where incense is currency, scent is scripture, and smoke is practically a spiritual Wi-Fi connection to the gods. Torches flicker in iron sconces, casting shadows across towering hieroglyphs. The floor is cool beneath your feet, and the air dense, warm, saturated with a perfume so thick, you feel like you're breathing through velvet. Somewhere nearby, a priest is swinging a censorit's rhythmic arc, releasing heavy plumes of incense that cling to the rafters like ghostly drapery. This isn't a religious ceremony for you, of course, but you're here all the same. Standing just behind a row of acolytes, observing the sacred ... and the smoky. The Egyptians believed that scent could carry prayers skyward literally. Burned offerings sent smoke to the heavens. A sweet delivery system intended to please gods with highly refined olfactory standards. And yet, while all this piety floats up toward Horus or Ra, there's a practical bonus. These temples, bug-free zones. Because nothing says divine favor like a room no mosquito dares enter. Today's recipe seems to be kefia, legendary incense blend that probably deserves its own line of artisanal Etsy candles. Historians know it involved a long list of ingredients, some of which are still debated. Raisins, honey, wine, myrrh, frankincense, and a dozen herbs crushed and blended into a paste, aged like fine perfume or stinky fruitcake. And yes, scholars are still arguing about the exact method. Was it boiled, kneaded, fermented? Did it function purely as incense, or was it also eaten medicinally? You edge a bit closer. Watching a priest in leopard skin robes slowly ladle warm resin into the censer. The mixture sizzles slightly, and the smoke that curls up smells ... complex. Sweet at first, then sharp, then oddly familiar, like cinnamon baked into old books. The acolytes sway gently in unison. The entire room feels choreographed, perfumed, purposeful. You find yourself breathing deeper, slower, almost hypnotized. And then just behind the altar you spot something moving. A young assistant, barefoot and serious, is walking along the perimeter of the room, fanning low smoke into corners with a reed fan. The gesture is religious, yes, but it also serves another, much humbler purpose. Chasing away insects from the corners, because even in the presence of gods, bugs are a problem. The priest glances back and gives the assistant an approving nod. It's working. Outside the temple walls, Thebes teems with noise and life, but in here, it's sanctuary. And incense is the bouncer. You stroll through a side corridor, nose still tingling with resin, and emerge in a garden that belongs to the temple complex. The garden is full of sycamore trees, papyrus ponds, and rows of aromatic herbs, tea, mint, marjoram. These are not just decorative, they're grown specifically to be harvested, dried, and turned into temple incense or body oil. You pick a sprig of mint and rub it between your fingers. The smell is strong, invigorating, sharp. You imagine someone mixing it into oil to massage a sore shoulder, or maybe stuffing it into a tiny linen sachet to tuck into a priest's robes before he walks through a crowd. Some priests likely smell divine, others less so. According to some records, temple hygiene was rigorous. Priests bathed several times a day, shaved their bodies, and applied fragrant oils. Others suggest that the scent rituals were mostly reserved for high ceremonies. In either case, you re fairly sure someone back then skipped a bath or two and hoped Kiffy smoke would cover the gap. You sit beneath a tree and watch as more bundles of herbs are gathered and loaded into baskets. Nearby, a group of women chant quietly while grinding myrrh and labdanum into paste. The chant is rhythmic, soothing, part prayer, part pest control strategy. And here's something mildly ironic. Temples, often built near water sources for purification, were prone to insect infestations. Stagnant ponds meant mosquitoes, and unsealed granaries invited beetles and weevils, which made incense not just a holy indulgence, but a borderline necessity. You walk past a small side shrine, its walls blackened from years of offerings. A pile of old incense ash sits in a niche, still faintly aromatic even after all this time. The smell brings to mind cedar chests and old robes, like memory made solid. A cat darts past your legs, chasing a beetle that wandered a bit too close to a sacred statue. You watch it disappear into the shadows, tail high, mission accomplished. Another form of pest control, feline and fragrant. You lean against a carved pillar and take one last deep inhale. The air smells like centuries, like memory, like ritual. You imagine the daily work that went into keeping a temple like this aromatic. The harvesting, the blending, the drying racks, the constant supervision to ensure nothing spoiled or attracted rot. The balance of pleasing the gods while also not smelling like damp papyrus and frog spawn. And while it might feel elaborate over the top, even there's something deeply comforting about the intention behind it all. The way every scent has a place, a purpose, a reason, even if that reason is mostly keep the gnats out of the holy water. As the sky above the courtyard begins to pale with early morning light, you sit quietly on a stone bench. The last wisps of kife curling around your ankles, and wonder what the gods really thought of all these scented offerings. Did they care? Did they notice? Or were they just glad to share space with a slightly less buggy humanity? Either way, it worked. You're still here, still breathing it in, and not a mosquito in sight. You wander from the temple back into the waking city, the scent of kifi still lingering faintly on your tunic, like a divine afterthought. The sun is creeping back over the rooftops, casting long golden stripes across dusty stone and woven awnings. But instead of heading to another shrine, your path veers toward something more domestic. You've been invited very informally to the home of a reasonably well-off artisan, someone who makes their living crafting stone jars and alabaster perfume vessels. And more importantly, someone who smells like a walking apothecary. Inside, the house is quiet and cool, thick walls shielding it from the building heat outside. A servant is busy rubbing what appears to be a mix of garlic oil and crushed coriander onto the arms of the house's matron. You pause, uncertain. Is this some kind of spicy breakfast? No, this is morning skincare, ancient Egyptian edition. The matron laughs at your raised eyebrows. You think perfume is just for looking pretty? She teases, gesturing toward a jar filled with yellowish oil. Try spending a day in this climate with open windows and no netting. Everything that crawls, bites. She's not exaggerating. In this house, perfume has evolved into our Mura daily ritual of self-defense, hydration, and aromatic posturing. The garlic oil, as it turns out, is a common repellent. Pungent, greasy, and probably very effective. Less romantic than a cone of blue lotus wax, but no one's melting those over breakfast. You're invited to try a dab. You hesitate. Garlic, really? But as you cautiously rub a few drops into your skin, you have to admit there's something oddly bracing about it. Not pleasant per se, but definitely assertive. Like saying to the bugs, you're not welcome, and neither is your cousin. A young daughter wanders by, her braids bouncing as she carries a small jar filled with something much nicer rose and mint oil. She offers it generously, and soon your garlic sheen is balanced by floral notes. You're now confusing two insects and mildly bewildering to any passers-by. One of the more amusing truths of ancient Egypt is that body oils were everywhere. They were sold in the markets, gifted at celebrations, and rubbed into every imaginable surface. High-status citizens oiled themselves head to toe, not just for scent, but for skincare in a sun-soaked, sand-chafed environment. The rich used scented blends. The poor used cast-offs or olive byproducts. But just about everyone glistened a little. And yes, before you ask, historians still debate the exact purpose of certain ingredients. Was fenugreek included for its anti-inflammatory properties, or simply because it masked the smell of donkey stables? Did women choose almond oil for its texture, or because someone said Cleopatra used it once? You take a short tour of the home's small storage room. Inside are ampery and tightly sealed jars, labeled with careful hieroglyphs each, denoting a different mixture. Some are reserved for guests, others for religious festivals, and one jar simply reads "Bad Days." You don't open that one. There's also a bundle of what looks like dried grass tied with string. You're told it's to be burned near the floor, part air freshener, part fumigation stick. The family doesn't call it incense, they just say it keeps the flies quiet. And indeed, there are noticeably fewer insects buzzing around here than there were near the fish vendor you passed earlier. You move through the home, noticing small terracotta diffusers nestled in windowsills. Each holds a bit of resin or wax meant to melt slowly in the heat and release soft scent throughout the day. It's like a plug-in air freshener. If your electricity came from the sun and your plug was just a rock with a bowl on top. By mid-morning, the whole household is perfumed, protected, and beginning their daily routines. The children head off to lessons, their skin gleaming with lavender oil. The matron starts kneading bread while humming, her apron already scented with thyme from last night's stew. And the father, a perfumer by trade, prepares for the day by warming a dish of myrrh resin near a brazier. Letting its smoke steep into his clothes, you pause near the entrance, watching him layer scents like someone building a suit of armor. First, the warming smoke, then a splash of sweet flag root oil, then a powder of crushed rose petals. It's delicate, practiced, and mildly theatrical. And you get the sense that he's done this every day for the last 30 years, probably in the same corner of the house. There's a soft hum of comfort to it all. The familiar gestures, the shared understanding that, even in a world without soap, pumps, and bug spray, people found ways to make themselves feel clean, protected, and slightly fabulous. You leave with a head that smells like a flower market, an arm that smells like an herb garden, and a faint sheen that makes you glint in the sun like some sort of aromatic lizard. And as you walk back toward the market square, the scent of garlic still clinging stubbornly to your elbow. You wonder, who really had the better idea? The nobles with their melty wax cones, or the families who just rubbed themselves down with kitchen ingredients and called it a day? Maybe both. Or maybe, just maybe. The garlic was the ancient Egyptian equivalent of do not disturb. By now, the heat is climbing not in some dramatic blaze, but in that sticky, incremental way that turns sandstone streets into low-level ovens and makes every living creature dream of water, shade, or possibly reincarnation. You duck into an alley where the air is a bit cooler and the scents of the morning marketplace begin to fade. Your destination? Somewhere a little more exclusive. Today, you're shadowing a team of perfumers who work within the royal household not as guests, but as specialists. These aren't your street-side oil hawkers. These are the professionals responsible for maintaining the olfactory dignity of the pharaoh himself. You re-led through a shaded corridor by a royal steward who smells faintly of juniper and rosewater. He opens a thick, linen-draped doorway and gestures inside, where sunlight streams through a high skylight, illuminating shelves of ingredients, bronze tools, and something truly beautiful. A collection of glass and alabaster perfume bottles, carefully sealed, lined up like a scented army. This, you're told, is one of the royal scent chambers, not a full laboratory, not a temple space, but something in between. You're standing in the middle of scented security detail, where oils and resins are blended with the kind of precision usually reserved for military operations. The pharaoh's safety, after all, isn't just about guards and chariots, it's about smell. And in a palace teeming with visitors, servants, diplomats, animals, and yes, insects, keeping the air clean and protective is serious business. A senior perfumer, wrinkles carved deep by years of proximity to flame and resin, greets you with a nod. He's preparing the pharaoh's personal blend, something you don't dare touch. Instead, you observe as he combines labdanum, cedar, and blue lotus in careful proportions. One wrong move, and the entire day could smell off. And for the king, that's unacceptable. You're handed a smaller task. Assist in preparing warding salves, fragrant ointments rubbed onto doorways, bedposts, even the pharaoh's sandals. The mixture includes powdered frankincense, olive oil, and ground fennel, with just a whisper of honey. You mix it gently with a carved bone spoon and feel, for a moment, like a very tired, very sweaty wizard. You ask quietly whether these blends are meant for pleasure or protection. The senior perfumer grunts. Both, he says. Always both. Historians still debate the true purpose of such scents. Were they practical tools to mask the smells of royal living? Or were they layered symbols meant to align the pharaoh with the divine? To separate him not just from disease, but from the mere mortality of his subjects? Perhaps it's both. Perhaps scent was never just about the body, was about status, too. The pharaoh smelled better than you. Not just because he could afford the best ingredients, but because his aroma was curated, managed, almost sacred. You move into the adjoining chamber, where a pair of younger assistants are pouring warm oil over linen robes. Yes, the royal garments are being scented, too. The fabric will absorb the perfume, and when worn, it will exude a soft aura of cedar and cassia. Not strong just enough for anyone standing nearby to feel slightly humbled. Nearby, a basket holds a few sad-looking herbs tied in bundles. The assistant explains they're for the palace dogs, who are occasionally rubbed down with scented pastes to repel fleas and reduce their, shall we say, dogginess. This is the level of detail we're talking about. Even the pharaoh's pets smell better than you. And yet, not all the scents are expensive. You pass a small bowl filled with dried lemongrass, simple, fragrant, and surprisingly effective. One assistant crushes some beneath his foot while walking through the corridor. A trick to lightly perfume the air without lighting anything. Frugal, clever, and it works. At the far end of the chamber, another servant is preparing the bedroom. This is where the pharaoh sleeps, or at least rests during the hottest part of the day. The bedding is lightly infused with sweet marjoram and myrtle. Not too much. Just enough to lull the senses. Mosquito nets, made from fine linen, are also scented. The blend includes garlic oil, again because no matter how royal you are, bugs are still disrespectful. The pharaoh's canopy bed smells like a summer garden, and a spice market had a very polite conversation. One assistant walks in with a new batch of perfume conscious. Even royalty melts scented wax over their heads, though perhaps with a bit more ceremony. These cones are denser, richer, more exotic ingredients like Indian cardamom and distant pine resins traded from beyond the Sinai. They're more expensive, but at their core, still insect repellent. Still sweat management. It's a bit comforting to realize that even the most powerful man in Egypt needed to smell like something other than sun-baked sandals. You help place a few jars onto a golden tragifs for a visiting dignitary. Each jar contains a different scent profile. Floral, woodsy, spicy, and one simply labeled Desert Breeze, which smells suspiciously like crushed straw and very wishful thinking. And as the visit ends and the perfumers bow their heads and resume their careful rituals, you take one final breath of the room's atmosphere, soothing, rich, and strangely humbling. The pharaoh may rule the land, but someone else ensures he smells like he deserves to. And behind all the gold and glory is a little jar of something sticky, floral, and just pungent enough to keep the flies away. You step out of the royal residence with your senses slightly overwhelmed. It's a beautiful kind of overload, the kind that makes your head float just a little, like you've had too much wine or spent too long in a candle store. The perfume of the palace still clings to your tunic, but now it's time to descend from royalty to reality. The marketplace awaits. You enter a broad, sun-drenched square, buzzing with vendors and customers. The air hums with haggling laughter, goats, and flies that move just fast enough to escape a swat. The sun bounces off rows of polished stone, and shade comes in short supply. It's here, amid clay jars and colorful awnings, that the commerce of scent truly flourishes. Everywhere you turn, someone is selling smell. A stout woman with forearms like tree trunks fans smoke from a clay bowl, coaxing a warm fragrance from burning tamarisk wood. Her stall specializes in market-grade cones. Less Blue Lotus, more mystery wax. She insists her recipe wards off both insects and ungrateful husbands. Next door, a boy no older than 10 is grinding dried herbs into powder. His hands move fast, and you smell thyme, lemon balm, and what might be roasted barley. It's sold in small linen pouches. Crush and inhale when you need clarity, he says, or burn it in a brazier when your neighbor's cooking fish again. There's a subtle hierarchy here. Some stalls reek of cheap camphor and cloying sweetness. Others smell like actual care went into the process, and the customers can tell. One woman with a gold bangle holds a sample jar to the light, sniffs, and immediately walks away. The vendor sighs and returns it to the good shelf for the next unsuspecting nose. You pass a vendor who boasts of importing cinnamon from the edge of the world. He's probably lying. But the bark he offers smells warm and honest, and you catch yourself lingering. Nearby, another merchant dangles a twist of dried myrrh on a string and swears it will keep scorpions out of your sandals, a claim that historians still argue over. The most charming stall is the one covered in mismatched jars glass. Clay, redrapped and unlabeled. The seller invites you to play Guess the Scent. You try one, and it smells like sour dates and regret. You smile politely. Another is sharply piney, perhaps conifer resin from the eastern desert. The third smells almost minty. The seller winks. Catmint keeps rodents away. Probably guests too. There's a musicality to the way people talk about their wares here. They don't just say perfume, they say sun trap in a jar, kiss for the wrist, sneeze for your enemies. One man sells a blend of spices and floral oils specifically to sprinkle on doorways. To make your home smell less like a camel and more like a priest's armpit, he adds proudly. You turn a corner and find yourself in the raw goods section. Here, bundles of dried herbs hang like upside-down fireworks. Sacks of cinnamon, anise, and clove are weighed with carved stone scales. A woman slices open a ball of hardened frankincense, revealing its golden, sticky center. It smells divine and slightly like someone lit a pastry on fire in a good way. One stall is dedicated entirely to lotus flowers. Fresh, dried ground, pressed any way you like. The vendor, who has 2 missing teeth and no patience, claims the blue lotus is good for the nerves, digestion, and annoying cousins. You suspect its real power is in how hauntingly beautiful it smells. You inhale deeply, and for a second, the heat and dust dissolve into water and starlight. Not every seller is reputable, of course. You watch one man try to pass off rancid oil as exotic musk, and another sell sacred crocodile scent that smells suspiciously like wet linen. Shady deals are sealed with dramatic gestures and whispered claims about royal connections. You begin to wonder how many people here have met the pharaoh's actual perfumers. Probably 0. Still, there's an energy here that's oddly soothing. People know what they want. And what they want is something that smells less like today and more like a dream. You stop by a low stone bench where a child is helping his grandmother fold. Small sachets filled with dried chamomile and crushed juniper. She hands one to you with a grin and says, "Put this under your bed. No nightmares. No beetles." A bold promise. But she looks like she's never lost a fight to either. Nearby, a man paints little jars with floral motifs. "These are gifts," he explains. You buy a jar for a few copper pieces. It's filled with sandalwood-infused oil. And when you unstopper it, the smell transports you briefly to somewhere quieter, cooler, and just the tiniest bit sacred. You leave the market with a pouch full of mismatched samples, hands sticky with resin, and the realization that perfume here is not just luxurite's livelihood. It's defense, identity, expression, and most of all, it's daily. As you step into the shade of an alley to rest, you feel your body cool. The scents you've collected cling to you like invisible threads. Spice from one vendor, a blossom from another, maybe even a hint of that suspicious crocodile scent. And as the wind picks up, carrying with it a dozen mingled fragrances, You smile. In ancient Egypt, you are your scent. And today, you smell like a story. You follow the soft trail of incense smoke toward the sacred district again this time. Not to a grand public temple, but to a smaller, more intimate structure nestled near a canal. It's dedicated to Hathor, goddess of beauty, love, and conveniently fragrance. Fitting then that this little sanctuary seems less like a monument and more like a spa that stumbled into holiness. The priests here are quieter, more deliberate. They wear robes scented with crushed rose petals, their hair laced with oils. As you step over the threshold, the difference is immediate. The air doesn't just smell good, feels thick with devotion wrapped in aroma. A line of devotees has already gathered outside, each carrying a small token bundles of dried herbs, ceramic cones, tiny jars of oil. These aren't flashy offerings. They're not trying to impress the gods with gold. They're here to ask for favors, for healing, for sleep, for love, and what they bring in return. Sent, inside the temple, a priest prepares the day's first offering. He arranges resin chunks on a heated slab, crushes a few blue lotus petals, and adds them to the mixture with the kind of reverence most people reserve for crown jewels. The mixture starts to melt and bubble, releasing a soft, smoky perfume that wafts upward and clings to the rafters. Acolytes walk slowly through the side aisles, swinging small censers in figure eights. Their movements are hypnotic, rhythmic, choreographed like incense ballet. The whole space smells like the inside of a flower market wrapped in warm honey. You stand back, quietly observing, as the first devotee steps forward. She offers a small cone-clearly homadand places it beside the altar. It melts slightly in the heat, releasing a burst of peppermint and something grassy. Not luxurious, but deeply personal. The priest nods approvingly and offers her a dab of oil in return. She dabs it on her wrists and leaves, visibly calmer. You learn that the exchange of scents here is symbolic. Worshippers bring fragrance to show their devotion scents they've harvested, blended, or traded for. In return, they receive temple-crafted oils believed to carry a touch of Hathor's favor. Not magical, perhaps, but undeniably soothing. You sit for a moment near a low wall adorned with faded reliefs. They depict women pouring oil from elegant jars, priests waving fans over resin burners, cats winding between perfume cones stacked like little pyramids. One carving shows a seated goddess cupping a blossom to her nose. It's a surprisingly human detail in a sea of iconography. You're struck by the simplicity of it all. Smell as devotion, as connection, not just to the divine, but to others. A way to say, I was here. I cared enough to leave behind something beautiful. One of the junior priests explains that they also perform ritual fumigation smoke ceremonies to cleanse not just people, but objects. A scribe recently brought in a set of papyrus scrolls believed to carry bad luck. After several rounds of cedar smoke and chanting, the scrolls were deemed emotionally aired out and returned. Whether the curse was lifted or just stunned into silence, no one knows. The scent used in such rituals is specially crafted. A blend of sweet flagroot, burnt sycamore, and a hint of dried citrus peel. The result? Sharp enough to sting the nose, soft enough to linger in memory. You notice that even the cats here dozing in patches of filtered light smell faintly of oil. A priest confirms they occasionally anoint temple animals with diluted scents, both to honor them and to keep them from smelling like ... well, cats. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or unique to certain temples. Some believe that anointing animals was a symbolic act meant to elevate them closer to the divine. Others think it was just a polite way to prevent your sacred ibis from offending visiting royalty. You stroll to the garden behind the temple, a quiet courtyard of lilies, tamarisk trees, and a bubbling fountain surrounded by terracotta pots filled with fragrant herbs. A woman is carefully trimming marjoram into a small pouch while her child rubs a stick of solidified resin against a stone, as if scribbling perfume into the earth. They smile at you, wordlessly offering a sample. You press it to your palm. smells like memory, sweet and bitter and green all at once. By the entrance, a weathered sign reads, "Come with scent in your hands, leave with peace in your chest." It's not written in hieroglyphs, just scratched into clay. Someone probably added it long after the temple was built. But it's perfect. As you prepare to leave, a breeze stirs the garden, rustling the petals of a white lotus. The scent lifts, just faintly, into the air, carried upward toward a sky that's been watching over this temple for centuries. You close your eyes and let the fragrance pass through you. And for a moment, you're not thinking about bugs, or sweat, or pharaohs. You're just breathing, slowly, completely, like incense drifting upward, meant for gods and found by you. From the tranquility of the temple garden, your path turns downward, both literally and atmospherically. A low, narrow staircase descends into the earth, torchlit and carved from sandstone, its edges worn smooth by generations of feet and funerals. The air grows cooler, and the scents change too. Gone are the lotus and lemon balm. Here, it smells of salt, earth, resin, and something unmistakably ancient. You're entering a tomb. Not one of those grand pyramid vaults, but a modest private burial tucked into the necropolis outside Thebes. This is where the middle and upper classes came to rest, sealed with offerings, prayers, and of course a potent haze of aromatic strategy. The hallway leads to a main chamber filled with painted walls, empty jars, and the unmistakable signature of funerary incense, frankincense baked into dust. You step gently over a small ceramic jar lying on its side, its once fragrant contents long since evaporated. Still, the scent clangs faintly to the stone-and olfactory echo of a 3,000-year-old goodbye. You're met by a burial attendant, a lean man with palms stained by oil and eyes that seem permanently half-closed. He gestures for you to join him at the side of a freshly sealed niche. Inside lies the mummified body of a woman, wrapped carefully in linens, her head crowned with a nausolid cone of perfumed wax. You inhale. Even in death, she smells. Intentional. It's not pleasant. Exactly. Sharp. Resinous like tree sap left too long in the sun, but it's unmistakably crafted. The cone may be dry now, but its base was likely made of labdanum and beeswax, with oils of cedar and thyme mixed in. The goal wasn't just to mask decay, was to transform it to guide the soul upward while keeping the flies firmly away. The attendant explains, in his soft, gravelly voice, that perfume in burial wasn't just tradition, it was protection. The body was wrapped in oils, the tomb sealed with incense, and the room filled with aromatic decoys, jars of strong scent meant to draw bugs and scavengers away from the main event. You raise an eyebrow, like ancient Egyptian air freshener traps. He shrugs. Sure, that. Historians still argue about the exact recipes used in embalming. Herodotus left us colorful descriptions involving palm wine, cassia, and myrrh. Most scholars agree he only saw part of the process. Some believe beeswax played a key role. Others suggest tree resins were more important. What they all agree on, it stank. And perfume was the first line of defense. You crouch near a pile of broken vessels. Each once held oil, ointment, or crushed flour. Inscriptions suggest they were pleasing to the gods, or soothing to the soul. Whether those gods or souls had much say is another story. But the intention is clear. Smell was part of death's toolkit. You reach out to touch a bundle of linen and pause. The scent is still there. Faint, yes, but undeniably real. You close your eyes and imagine what this room smelled like when it was new. Fresh cut cedar, floral resin, a sharp tang of myrrh, the perfect blend of mourning and mosquito repellent. You move to a deeper chamber, darker and more cramped. Here, jars still sit, sealed canopic vessels holding the organs of the deceased, each one nestled in a cradle of scented wax. You remember now that scent was also used inside the body. Oils were poured into skulls. Cavities were stuffed with herbs. Everything layered, sealed, perfumed. Death in ancient Egypt wasn't clean, but it was aromatically managed. You glance up at the ceiling. The soot from long-burnt incense still clings there. Centuries later, you picture the funeral procession, the relatives in their best linen. The mourners fanning themselves while incense burned so thick it likely made them weep for reasons beyond grief. And then you notice a small jar tucked behind a broken brick. Curious, you open it carefully and find a hardened lump of blackened paste. The attendant sniffs. "Old Kiffy," he murmurs. Still trying to do its job, you step back out into the light sometime later, eyes adjusting, the sharp snap of the sun almost startling. But something lingers with you, the blend of heat and perfume, of decay and defiance. In that tomb, scent wasn't about indulgence. It was about hope. Hope that the gods might find you more palatable. Hope that the flies might not find you at all. Hope that scent might soften the harsh edges of death. You pause at the entrance, looking back one last time. And you realize the ancient Egyptians didn't perfume the dead to hide what was coming. They did it to remind everyone what once was: sweetness, warmth, life, even if only for a little while longer. You leave the necropolis behind, blinking against the midday light as you rejoin the world of the living. Dust clings to your sandals, and there's a faint trace of Old Kiffy still curling around the hem of your tunic. It's a scent you now associate not with death, but with Kara, kind of aromatic kindness that lingers even in silence. Back among the sunlit courtyards and humming streets of Thebes, you're invited into the home of a noblewoman, someone who, judging by her linen quality and number of cats, is definitely doing well for herself. Her servants guide you through a shaded hallway, past woven screens and breeze-catching reeds. The air smells better here. Cooler, crisper, touched with something floral and faintly minty. You've entered her private chamber, and it's a miniature museum of self-presentation. The walls are lined with shelves, each holding items not of wealth, but of fragrance. Alabaster jars, painted boxes, small clay cups. Some are sealed with wax, others are open, inviting you to sniff. You oblige. One smells of crushed iris root, another of lemon and cinnamon, a third. Well, let's just say you'll never doubt that onions were sacred again. She arrives quietly, already perfumed, her robe fluttering gently as she steps into the light. On her wrist, she wears a small amulet carved with the image of Base, the dwarf god of protection. But what catches your eye is the tiny vial hanging from her necklace, a portable perfume jar, painted with lotus petals and capped with cork. She laughs when she notices you staring. "It's for the heat," she says, "and the neighbors." She offers you a seat on a low stool near her cosmetics table. It's cluttered, but intentionally so. She begins opening small containers and explaining her collection with the enthusiasm of someone who knows her scents like a modern influencer knows her hashtags. "This one's for clarity," she says, waving a cinnamon and cardamom blend under your nose. "This one's for seduction." You flinch at something that smells like pine and vinegar. "And this one," she whispers, showing a jar wrapped in embroidered cloth, "is for dreams." You lean closer. The scent is gentle, woody, and slightly sweet-like, falling asleep in a cedar chest with a pot of honey. She dabs a tiny drop onto your temple, just for fun. You suddenly want to nap for 12 years. She explains that these perfumes are more than just beauty aids. They're magical tools, protective charms, social cues. One oil might signal availability, another, mourning. Still another says, "Don't talk to me unless you've also bathed." Many Egyptians believed certain scents could ward off spirits or encourage fertility. Others were used during childbirth, rubbed into the ankles or behind the ears. And at least one jar on the shelf claims to cure bad dreams, though historians still argue whether this particular remedy was more psychological than chemical. She shows you her travel pouch, which includes miniature jars, small pouches of dried herbs. and a tiny cone wrapped in linen. In case the party's boring, she jokes, slipping it back into a drawer. And then she shows you her favorite, a tiny wand-like tool carved from ivory, used to anoint the skin with oil without getting your fingers messy. It's shaped like a lotus flower and smooth from years of use. "It belonged to my mother," she says. "Still smells like her if you warm the tip." You do, and it does. It's a quiet moment in a room filled with fragrance and flickering light. You look around and realize this isn't just a space for dressing. It's a sanctuary, a laboratory. It's a temple of scent where daily rituals become memory through smell. Even the cats lounging by the doorway smell faintly of something musky. She claims she oils them lightly to keep fleas away. And because they like the attention, she adds. One yawns in agreement. You explore a small painted box filled with amulets and scented. Sachets, tiny linen bundles tied with string and stuffed with lavender, clove, and crushed reed. She places them under pillows, tucks them into drawers, even hangs them near doors. For luck, she says, or at least for a better smelling breeze. Historians still debate whether these sachets had actual medicinal properties, or if they simply made life more pleasant. But here, in this space, they are clearly both. Before you leave, she dabs a small dot of perfumed oil onto your wrist. You'll be safe for the next few hours, she says, from bugs, spirits, and awkward conversation. And as you step back into the sun, that small touch of scent follows you like a whispered farewell. It's floral, it's herbal, it's complicated, and for the first time all day, you realize you smell fantastic. You drift through the haze of perfumed confidence and into the livelier part of town, where music echoes off stucco walls and laughter bounces through alleyways. A gentle breeze carries the scent of baked bread and crushed coriander. Someone's lunchtime is underway. But today, you're not here for food. You're here to witness something a little more human. Because perfume, you've learned, isn't just about cleanliness or ceremony. It's about connection. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the tangled realms of love and war. You find yourself outside a modest home, where a group of young men are preparing for an evening celebration. Not a festival, not a feast, something more dangerous. A date. One of them is nervously adjusting his tunic, while another applies perfumed oil behind his ears with all the care of a man diffusing a bomb. There's a distinct aroma of sweet myrrh in the air, along with something citrusy. Possibly a form of ancient cologne. Definitely not subtle. You're invited to sit and watch the preparation. One man pulls out a small stone box containing several sticks of hardened resin. He grinds one between two polished shards and mixes it with warm water to make a scented paste, which he then smooths into his beard. The effect, earthy, rich, romantic if your idea of romance includes tree sap. "I want to smell like a library," he says with a wink. A sexy library. It turns out that ancient Egyptians were deeply aware of the social signaling power of scent. A man arriving to court a woman without any perfume on was seen as uncultured, possibly even unhealthy, and not just any perfume would do. The scent needed to match the mood. Myrrh for seriousness, cinnamon for excitement, lotus if you were really trying to impress. Historians still puzzle over some of the recipes found in love poetry and medical papyri. One, translated roughly, suggests an infusion of blue lotus, fig pulp, and goose fat to soften the heart of the one you desire. Whether that works or just turns you into a dessert remains unclear. As the sun lowers, you follow the hopeful groomsmen to a quiet gathering near the riverbank. Here, a group of young women are reclining on reed mats, their skin glowing with oil, their wigs styled and destopped with fresh cones of scented wax. When one of the men sits beside a woman, she offers him a perfumed linen strip. He inhales it like it's the rarest flower on earth. It's a playful ritual, almost like flirting through scent. She lifts the strip away just as he reaches for it again. He grins. She dabs a bit on his wrist. Connection made. Chemistry confirmed. Pheromones, ancient addition. Meanwhile, another guest shares that he's preparing for a long journey southward toward Nubia. He's packing his belongings carefully. And nestled among the practical items rope, dried meat, tools as a small vial of cinnamon oil. To stay healthy, he says, and to not smell like donkeys. Scent, after all, wasn't just romantic, it was strategic. Travelers used aromatic herbs and salves to avoid infection, disguise their scent from animals, and maintain social standing on the road. Military commanders issued oil to soldiers not just to protect their skin, but to calm their nerves and mask the unpleasantries of camp life. One apocryphal tale describes a general who used a blend of cedarwood and burnt barley as an aromatic shield before battle. His troops supposedly smelled him before they saw him, and it became a rallying signal. Whether true or not, the idea of marching into danger with a signature scent is strangely inspiring. You join a group seated around a low fire. They're passing around a jar of what smells like roasted fennel and ginger, mixed with crushed dates. One woman applies a dab to the inside of her sandals to prevent blisters and allegedly keep away traveling spirits. Another man rubs it on his chest before telling a long story about navigating through crocodile-infested waters. It's clear now. Perfume was communication. A way to say, I'm here. I'm worth your attention. I am not to be bitten today. Thank you. And sometimes it was all of those things at once. As the night stretches on, the guests grow looser, more relaxed. The candles flicker and the perfumed cones begin to melt. The air is filled with lotuses' laughter, cinnamon, flirtation, and the quiet. Almost imperceptible hum of people being exactly who they want to be at their best and their most fragrant. You lie back on a woven mat, the soft notes of someone's scent drifting toward you like an exhale. And for a moment, in this tender, spicy haze, you understand that smell is never just smell. It's memory, intent, identity, and possibly ancient, low-key superpower. The scent of cinnamon still lingers in your hair as you step into the quiet courtyard of a modest healer, as home feeler is the right word. Some call her a wise woman, others a midwife. A few simply say she knows things. What's certain is this: her house smells like nothing else in Thebes. It's part apothecary, part kitchen, and part mild hazard zone. Jars line every available surface, each holding strange ingredients steeping in oil, wine, or something that could be both. The air is heavy with herbal warmth and something off. Something sharp and sour, like onions left in the sun too long or wet reeds fermenting in a cellar. You catch a whiff of crocodile dung, and your stomach instinctively second-guesses your choices today. She notices your nose wrinkle and grins. Yes, that's the birth charm. You blink. She gestures to a paste in a clay de chat muddled mixture of resin, dried herbs, goose fat, and crocodile dung. It's meant to be applied to the thighs during labor, or so the old scrolls claim, for protection, she says, and maybe just to clear the room. You're not sure whether to be impressed or deeply concerned. It turns out that ancient Egyptian cosmetics and medicinal treatments often overlapped hand. Both were scented, for better or for worse. While temples and nobles leaned on blue lotus and cinnamon, everyday people used whatever worked, no matter how strange it smelled. You sit cross-legged beside a tray of ointments, while she prepares a new batch of skin salve. The base is beeswax and almond oil, gently warmed over a brazier. Into it, she adds crushed rose petals, marjoram, and ground date pits. The mixture smells lovely, earthy, floral, a little nutty. She says it's for cracked heels and restless hearts. Historians still debate whether these mixtures were truly effective or just placebo wrapped in fragrance. But as she rubs a little onto your hand, it feels nice, soothing, and certainly more pleasant than the crocodile paste. You ask her about cosmetics, and she shows you her full vanity set, which includes not only scented oils, but also eye paints, henna, and lip stains, all fragrance to mask the base ingredients. The coal used to line eyes, for example, was often mixed with frankincense powder, not just to smell good, but to help with eye infections. A stylish antibiotic, if you will. One small jar catches your eye. It smells faintly of anise and wet linen. That's for bad dreams, she says. Rubbed into the soles of the feet with a prayer. Another smells like vinegar and pepper, to keep a husband faithful or just confused. A third jar is labeled with a crude drawing of a snake. She opens it proudly and says, "This one is for skin brightness." Also, maybe curses. You choose not to ask for clarification. The woman invites you to help grind a few ingredients with a polished stone mortar. As you work, she explains how scents were layered in daily routines, not just for beauty or comfort, but for safety, physical, spiritual, and emotional. You had to smell right for your situation. Scent marked you as protected, blessed, or simply not to be messed with. A young girl walks in with a basket of dried herbs. She's been gathering mint and artemisia from a nearby field. As they sort the bundles, they chat about someone in the village who's had troubles. A small sachet of myrrh, garlic, and crushed barley will be prepared for her to tuck under her mattress, just in case, they say. You help label the new jars with painted symbols. One shows a flower, another a bird, a third just shows a bug with a big X through it. That one smells like burned celery and fear. The walls of the room are covered in faded glyph spells and recipes, some barely readable. One scroll claims that boiling crushed juniper berries with fish bones and wine guarantees peace at night. Another calls for 7 drops of goat's breath mixed with mulberry paste to prevent unwanted dreams. You sincerely hope that one was mistranscribed. Still, every blend you smell, every story you hear reinforces a simple truth. Scent was medicine. Even when it wasn't, it gave people a sense of control, of ritual, of hope. As the sun lowers outside, you help seal a batch of freshly made balm, this one for easing sore muscles and marital tensions. It smells like clove and lavender and something slightly mischievous. You say your thanks, and she slips you a small jar of sleep ointment. Smear a little on your temples, she says. Or just sniff it when the world is too noisy. You pocket it carefully, knowing full well that tonight, when the city gets quiet and the dreams get loud, you'll do exactly that. Because even in the most fragrant civilization on Earth, some smells weren't meant to repel bugs or please the gods. Some were just there to help you feel safe, to help you breathe, to help you sleep. As the afternoon light begins its slow descent, you wander beyond the city's richer quarters, past the perfumed villas and sacred courtyards, into a humbler stretch of Thebes. Here, the air is dustier, the buildings closer together, and the smells, well, they're a bit more agriculturally honest. You've entered the domain of farmers, craftsmen, and laborers. People who don't have alabaster jars of imported cinnamon oil lined up on polished shelves. People whose daily routines are sweaty, dusty, and bug-ridden. And yet, they, too, understand the power of scent. You approach a modest mud brick home where a mother is spreading dried goat dung into small piles near the doorway. No, that's not a typo. Smoke keeps the flies away, she says casually, lighting one of the piles with a smoldering reed. It flares for a second, then begins to smolder slowly, releasing a thin column of sharp, bitter smoke. It smells like campfire and compromise. You politely stand upwind. Inside the home, the story deepens. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters, mint, thyme, crushed onion stalks gathered not for flavor, but for function. They're burned on tiny hearths, boiled into teas, or simply stuffed into pillowcases to confuse mosquitoes and bad spirits alike. A father returns from the fields, his arms caked in clay and sun. He rinses off, then rubs castor oil into his shoulders, mixed with something pungent and peppery. It's not fancy. It's not even all that pleasant. But it keeps the flies from treating him like a buffet. A child toddles past you wearing a tiny protective amulet strung on a cord around her neck, a small wax cone. A right stiff. its scent long faded. It was once perfumed, the mother explains, but even now she believes it holds some power. It's for luck, she says, and maybe for keeping the baby's dreams calm. You sit in the courtyard as evening settles in, watching smoke from tiny fires drift lazily toward the sky. Some neighbors are burning tamarisk wood. Others are drying onion skins on woven mats, planning to boil them later, and use the broth to wash clothes or ward off fever, depending on who you ask. Historians still puzzle over many of these folk practices. Were they based on observation or oral tradition? Did they work, or did they simply make people feel safer in a world with too many invisible dangers? Probably both. You're invited to try a household perfume. It's a mash of dried orange peel, crushed barley, and old wine, warmed into a paste and dabbed behind the ears. It smells nostalgic, like a marketplace at closing time. You smile. Not bad? The family laughs and insists it's the poor man's cone. One elder boasts that it's kept her bug bite free for 40 years. You're not sure that's scientifically provable, but she looks smug enough to convince Ra himself. As the stars begin to blink overhead, the neighbors gather. Someone plays a flute, another sings softly. And yes, even here, someone produces a tiny jar of budget incense-burned bread, dried reeds, and a bit of old honey pressed into a cone and set alight. The smoke is rough, uneven, but oddly comforting. You realize something. While the rich might have worn imported perfume to signal status, the poor wore smell as a shield, an expression, a lifeline. A young boy tells you his mother rubs garlic on the doorframe at night, so the spirits don't wander in. His sister says she tucks rosemary into her sleeping mat, so I don't dream about snakes. And while your modern brain might file these as superstition, your tired heart, the one warmed by candlelight and goat dung smoke, gets it. Because scent, even when simple, offers a sense of control. A promise whispered into the dark that says, you are safe, you are seen. You smell like someone who belongs, and maybe that's enough. You lie back against a sun-warmed wall, your clothes faintly dusted with soot and resin, your hair carrying notes of tamarisk and thyme. There's no incense here that costs a fortune, no blue lotus dripping over wigs. But there is something sacred in this evening air, an honesty of scent, and it cradles you gently. Night has fully arrived now, slipping softly over Thebes like a silken veil. The stars blink gently into place above you, and the city takes on its most tranquil form, fewer shouts, fewer carts. Just the occasional jangle of anklets and the flicker of oil lamps behind linen-curtained doorways. You wander along the banks of the Nile, the breeze cooler now, tinged with the scent of silt and lotus. Even here, in the open air, you catch it, incense wafting from a fisherman's boat. A street vendor burning dried herbs beside his basket of figs, someone on a distant rooftop lighting a perfumed cone to mark the end of the day. And this time, your steps take you not into a home or market, but into something far less aromatic and far more cerebral. A scribe's study. Yes, tonight we're looking at the nerds of ancient Egypt, and let's just say, aromatically speaking, they had opinions. The study is modest. Papyrus rolls tucked in cubbies, ink blocks, reeds. A small brazier in the corner, puffing out gentle curls of juniper smoke. The scribe, a middle-aged man with ink-stained fingers and a surprisingly luxurious beard, motions for you to sit. He pours a small cup of date wine and gestures toward a stack of papyri. I was just reviewing the Kefi arguments, he mutters. You blink? The what? He explains. Historians are still arguing them back then about the proper recipe for Kefi. Some scrolls list 10 ingredients. Others claim over 20. Some require it to age 4 days. Others insist on weeks. There's even a scroll where the final step says to recite a specific hymn while stirring clockwise under moonlight. You get the feeling it's a bit like Grandma's soup, recipe delicious, sacred, and deliberately confusing. He hands you a small dish. It holds what looks like a hardened resin pebble. You sniff. sweet, sharp, layered. That's my version, he says. Myrrh, wine, pine, honey, a little dried mint. And 2 secrets, you ask about the arguments, and he grins. Apparently, scribes across the land were constantly sending letters to one another debating the proper proportions, substitutes, and even the intent of these perfume blends. Was it for the gods? He asks rhetorically. For dreams? For digestion? He shrugs. Yes. Scholars today still argue, too. Some believe Kefi was primarily medicinal, used to relieve anxiety and aid sleep. Others see it as a ritualistic offering only, never meant to be inhaled casually. Then there's the strange case of a foreign diplomat who wrote that it simply made the room feel less haunted. Interpret that however you like. You move to a side table where a copyist is reproducing a scroll. She's using powdered ink mixed with scented oil, something that was sometimes done to keep pests from eating the papyrus. Turns out, bookworms hate mint. Who knew? She smiles and offers you a try. The ink smells faintly of basil and warm rain. You dip the reed pen and trace a small symbol, a perfume jar, the hieroglyph for sweetness. Even ancient paperwork smelled better than your current inbox. The scribe shares a theory that Egypt's obsession with perfume wasn't just cultural, it was a sensory worldview. To be in harmony was to be pleasing to the gods, to others, and to yourself. Cleanliness, scent, rhythm, and speech, they were all intertwined. You sip your wine. It tastes of raisins and resin. He chuckles. Smell is memory, he says. We preserve what we love with scent. Then he pulls out a final scroll, more casual, less sacred, and reads aloud a poem. It's an ode to a woman who wore a cone of lotus wax that melted down her back as she danced. The poet compares the trail of perfume to the Nile itself. Slow, winding, inevitable. It's romantic, a little cheesy, oddly comforting. You realize this is where all the pieces come together. The daily rituals, the spiritual smoke, the midnight cosmetics, the clove-soaked warriors, the garlic-scented children, the temple-scrubbed cats. This civilization wrote its story in scent. And though the scrolls crumble and the jars shatter, some trace of that story lingers in a jar in a museum, in a rediscovered recipe. In the way your mind softens when you catch a certain smell, as the brazier burns lower and the scrolls are tucked away. The scribe offers you a parting gift, a sealed cone of his own making. For when you can't sleep, he says, or when you forget what comfort smells like, you take it with quiet gratitude. Because even now, thousands of years later, you're still learning to smell like memory. You leave the scribe's study with the cone tucked carefully in your pouch. Outside, the city of Thebes hums at its softest frequency low voices, clinking pottery, and the gentle rhythm of sandals brushing sand. Above, the stars stretch like scattered grains of white barley across a deep indigo sky. The Nile glistens in the distance, smooth and slow-moving, like everything else this hour. But your path now takes you farther still out past the city's edge. Across open fields and quiet embankments toward a small outpost where farmers, guards, and wanderers prepare for sleep under simpler roofs. You pass a low structure where a watchman tends a fire, its scent rising in visible coils. Tamarisk wood again, laced with crushed herbs. He nods as you approach. Keeps the bugs out, he says, and the nightmares, if you ask my grandmother. You smile and sit near the embers. It's quieter here. The breeze gentler, and the smells, though humbler, are deeply grounding. Someone nearby is boiling a late pot of tea over a reed flame. The scent carries lemongrass, dried fig leaves, and a whisper of mint. Another villager finishes her chores and tosses a handful of dried marjoram onto her hearth. Just to clean the air, she mutters, wiping her hands on her tunic. And because it smells like something good might happen. You're handed a cup of something warm and faintly sweet. You sip and close your eyes. The world softens. One man brings out a linen roll filled with small scent cones, flattened slightly on one end. They're not fancy, no painted wrappings or rare imports, just wax, dried flower, resin, and memory. My mother made these, he says. She said the gods don't care if it's expensive. They just want it made with your hands. He lights one. The cone hisses gently, then settles into a slow, fragrant smolder. It smells like honeyed wood and burnt herbs. Within minutes, the circle of people seated near the fire all grow quiet, breathing deeper, faces relaxing. Even the insects seem hesitant to interfere. And you, soaked in the accumulated perfumes of a day spent chasing scent across time, begin to notice what's missing. Not just noise or urgency or the stickiness of midday heat. What's missing now is the barrier between the physical and the emotional. You're not just smelling something nice, you're smelling belonging. And as the villagers begin to retreat into their reed huts or lie down under the open stars, the scent of the cone lingers soft, familiar, and a little sad. Like someone whispering a story you've heard before, but never quite remembered until now. You lie back against a woven mat, eyes tracing the stars overhead, the cone beside you still exhaling its gentle breath into the night. And in these final moments of stillness, you realize what all the perfume was for, not just to cover, repel, or attract. Not just for ceremony or flirtation, or even preservation. It was for this, to say, you are alive, you are known, you are here. You inhale one last time, cinnamon, lotus, smoke, and peace. Now, as the cone burns down to nothing, as the smoke thins and curls like a ribbon disappearing into the night, your breath slows. The world grows quieter still. You're no longer in Thebes or beside the Nile. You're simply here, wrapped in the faintest traces of ancient warmth. Memories carried on, scent and softness that lingers like a whisper just out of reach. Your body is still, your thoughts slower now. Every inhale feels deeper, every exhale a quiet release. Let them go, those fragments of the day, the worries, the noise. Let them drift like Kifi in a forgotten tomb, curling upward through shadowed stone. You lie back into your pillow, perhaps a little heavier now, not from burden, but from the gentle weight of something remembered, of old gardens. Temple courtyards, laughing strangers with lotus cones melting on their wigs. The past has curled around you tonight, not to impress or overwhelm, but to soothe. To remind you that even thousands of years ago, someone lit a small fire and hoped it would carry them into a sweeter sleep. Now you join them, quiet, still, and wrapped in a story. Breathe, let the scent fade, and sleep.